monkey needs to dance, so do you.
What are animal rights and what are human rights? Are they, in fact, at all different? Some would argue they are, but a critical analysis of these ideas quickly shows the bias and failed logic used to separate humans from animals. What could separate humans from animals? Thumbs, speech, using tools, future planning? There are various animals that do all these things. Apes and monkeys have thumbs and use them with varying degrees of dexterity. Whales, dolphins, and porpoises all communicate via sound, corresponding to human speech. Many birds and mammals use tools, and some even craft them. Recently, there have been confirmed reports of birds in Australia using fire to help them hunt prey. Not even Prometheus is unique in that regard. So what separates us from them? Historically, it was religion. Specifically, the three major monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These religions declared that their God made it okay for humans to dominate the environment around them, including the animals, both wild and domestic. In Judaism and Islam, the slaughtering of goats or sheep as a sacrifice to their God is still practiced in many places to this day. But we, as a society, have realized that not everything in religion is acceptable. Christians no longer burn witches, and slavery has fallen out of style. We generally reject the idea of death as a punishment, with the notable exception of the USA, still. Women are now supposed to be equal, a radical departure from religious precepts. Religion hasn't held as firm a grip upon society as it once did, not since the advent of science. However, even as science was first beginning to be practiced, religion was not far away. Examples are many, including Copernicus only publishing his revolutionary ideas of a heliocentric model of the solar system on his deathbed, out of fear of offending the religious leaders of the time. Heresy was a looming threat for any practitioner of the scientific philosophy. 100 years later, Descartes would use religion to declare that animals were no more than machines, different than humans, because they lacked a spirit. Unfortunately for Descartes, despite his horrible lack of empathy and ethics, he was never able to even begin a proof on what the spirit was. A reasonable scientist would have laughed hysterically at such a preposterous allegation. While one may believe in a spirit, its definition and its observation through science is still a long way off. And yet, Descartes' ridiculous ideas still inform modernity's perspective on animals, with very little, if any at all, critical thought about them. If science cannot even begin to talk about a spirit, which was Descartes' get-out-of-jail-free card, the rationale that allowed for his living vivisections, how do we explain them now? We can follow the path of our failures fairly simply. From Descartes' arbitrary declarations of who does and does not have a spirit, we move into colonialism and the savage. That is, those humans who have not accepted the truth of the Christian God. It was this justification that enabled the slaughter of the Native Americans in the New World, throughout both continents, North and South. It further enabled Europe's kings and queens to move into Africa and dominate there. A bustling slave trade was built upon their religious ideas, which would morph into pseudoscience at the beginning of the 19th century. After all, with no soul to go to heaven or hell, it mattered not how many savages were destroyed, because murder is only possible if the murdered has a soul. Even if we cannot clearly say what a soul is, or how one might interact with it. Arbitrary classifications have plagued humanity for its entire history. Today, we suffer from imaginary lines that Napoleon, of all people, drew on a piece of paper that was only a representation of real land, which contained real people and real animals and plants, none of which were represented on Napoleon's map. This bunk science was later called eugenics and was used to justify and rationalize the Holocaust. For the Nazis, a Jew was lacking a soul. The African was lacking a soul. A rationale was created for anything that impeded the hubris of power. Often, that rationale was simply a manipulative appeal to science. By twisting classifications and definitions, eugenics was the application of horrors in the name of science. Unfortunately, there is no way for science to defend itself, since it is only a tool used by humans to explain things. And humans will use nearly any tool to achieve and maintain power over just about anything. The results have been disastrous. Racism, poverty, wars, and the lost opportunities are uncountable. And so we finally come to freedom, to liberty. All humans are mammals. Not all mammals are humans. But all mammals are animals, though not all animals are mammals. For anyone concerned with freedom, one has to ask, where do we draw the line? Whatever you do, don't ask the egg-laying mammal we call a platypus, unless you're willing to dive into the failure of the human mind to translate the analog signal of life into a digital model of the mind. A classic case of more exceptions to the rule than there are that follow it. If we cannot reasonably define what separates humans from animals, then we can assume that any separation is a manufactured construct, like straight lines and perfect circles, unless we acquire new information that is not currently available. Additionally, when considering freedom, one must account for morality, a characteristic not unique to humans at all. Dog packs have their own understanding of morality. Prides of lions and primates, all stripes, exhibit the application of morals. This is a particularly vexing topic due to its subjectivity and the influences that come from culture and social norms or mores. So if one concerns themselves with their own freedom, they must concern themselves with others' freedom also. However, if we arbitrarily place borders around what we care about, then we are not actually concerned with freedom at all, but with superiority. If we reject the arbitrary constructs that artificially separate us from them, then we must explore what unites us. In our modern world, we respect women, at least we say we do. We respect their right to determine when and if and how they will procreate, how they will raise their offspring, and as we've recently seen with the Me Too movement, we respect their right to be secure in their own bodies, free from unwanted assaults. And yet, we as a society see nothing wrong with denying these basic rights and their tremendous symbolism to animals for the tautological reason that they are animals. This is exactly what we rejected. A 17th century view of women is unacceptable because we know the arguments for it are false. There is no God that demands women be subservient to men so that men might have a clean house, dinner, and sex. In exactly the same way, there is no God that demands a cow be artificially inseminated and her children ripped away from her so that a human can have cream for her coffee. There is no science that can defend the industrial murder of so many animals. At best, the only defense to be made is profit. But if that is an acceptable defense, then slavery must also be acceptable, as long as it is profitable. But it is not acceptable, regardless of its profit. It was Martin Luther King Jr. who said, "An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." This is still true to this day. What we do about injustice defines, perhaps more than anything, what a soul is. While we reject the rights of animals to live and prosper on their own terms with nature, we retain our Stone Age mindsets that will haunt us in the future.
A monkey needs to dance, so do you.